One of the reasons why it's so fun to read great works of literature is that, well, it immediately connects you to a whole community of people who also love to read great works, works that have endured and lasted in our culture and are still read today. Good morning, everybody. Welcome or welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Raymond Carver. What makes him so good? How come at university MFA programs all across the nation we're still studying this guy? Specifically, we're going to be talking about what we talk about when we talk about love, perhaps one of the best known collections. So whether you're reading this book for fun, to improve your own writing in your own career, or to write that pesky essay for your university class, I hope this video is going to be helpful for you. Please make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps me continue to put these videos up, and let's jump right into it. So the first thing to note about Raymond Carver is his introductions. So if you've got this book, you can open it up, or I'll put something along on the screen for you to follow along. Let's open up to page 11, where we've got the story, Viewfinder. Just take a look at that first paragraph. I'll read it out loud. A man without hands came to the door to sell me a photograph of my house. Except for the chrome hooks, he was an ordinary-looking man of 50 or so. How did you lose your hands? I asked, after he'd said what he wanted. That's another story, he said. You want this picture or not? Come in, I said. I just made coffee. All right, so let's pause for a second. Let's think about this intro. So we start, a man without hands came to the door. Immediately you're intrigued. Second half of that first line, to sell me a photograph of my house. So already the reader has a bunch of questions. And you think, hopefully, that those questions are going to be answered throughout the story. The next trick here in this story that I really appreciate is the question that immediately comes from our protagonist. How did you lose your hands? I asked after he'd said what he wanted. It's sort of the question that we all would want to ask if a person like this came up to our house, aside from, why are you taking pictures of my house? But with that line, what happens is that the protagonist of the story, the I character, takes on the mode of the reader. So as a reader, we're identifying with this protagonist. He's asking the same questions that we would want to be asking. So the mysterious man that comes to the door, he's the mystery that hopefully will be unraveling. We are the protagonist, or at least we're seeing the story through his eyes. Let's look at another one from the story called Gazebo. In the book, this is on page 21. That morning, she pours teachers over my belly and licks it off. That afternoon, she tries to jump out the window. I go, Holly, this can't continue. This has to stop. That one word, teachers, which is a brand, puts us into the story, into a time period. But really what we're all kind of wondering is, why is Holly trying to jump out the window? So we've got the beginning of the story being, a sexual act between two people, but then one of the people is obviously very upset for some reason. And the protagonist, the I in the story, is aware of why Holly is upset. We imagine that we're going to become aware as we continue reading the story. So there are a number of examples of these intros throughout the collection. And what springs up for each of these stories is that the first line or the first paragraph leaves the reader wanting more. Though it's sparse in details, we have just enough details to want something out of the story. That brings me into the second reason why this collection is so powerful, and that is the sparse nature of the sentences. Raymond Carver's sentences are very small. Oftentimes these sentences, hardly seem to say anything. They only include a couple of details, hardly any punctuation. Let's take a look back in that original story, Viewfinder. And let's just take a look at some sentences on page 13 that are out of the dialogue. I was trying to think of something to say. It was a long shot, but I watched him just the same. He leaned forward importantly, the cup balanced between his hooks. He set it down on the table. I had a headache. I know coffee's no good for it, but sometimes Jell-O helps. I picked up the picture. So all these sentences are very short, but they convey a lot of information to us. I was trying to think of something to say. He leaned forward importantly, the cup balanced between his hooks. He set it down on the table. Again, a very strong, concrete image that helps put the reader into the scene. We can imagine the man with the hooks putting the coffee down on the table. I had a headache. I know coffee's no good for it, but sometimes Jell-O helps. I picked up the picture. Again, we're back to our protagonist, his headache, the Jell-O. They're all very minor details, but each of these minor details gives us another something from these characters so that we know a little bit more about them. With these really small, sparse sentences, the story is unraveling, and there's no time for the reader to get confused. We can see what's happening as though we're watching it on the screen immediately when it happens. It's the funny thing about writing prose, In some ways, you're at a disadvantage because when you see something on the screen, well, the actors are doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you, especially if you see a really great actor or, you've got a really great cast, lighting, cinematography, what have you. There's so many ways to make an image look incredible. However, with prose, you don't really have any of those luxuries. You need to choose what the most important details are, what the reader might be expecting, or what the reader wants but doesn't know that they want. And you need to include those details in the right moment so that the reader can actually see what's happening in the scene. In that way, sometimes your imagination can be even more exciting than what you see on the television screen. That's part of why people love to read books so much. It really stimulates the imagination in a way that television or film can't. The third and final thing that makes Raymond Carver such a master, that we'll talk about today at least, comes from the fact that his stories are just so realistic. They deal with real human emotions and events, oftentimes emotions and events that are uncomfortable, that aren't often talked about in the public sphere even today. Back when Raymond Carver was writing in the 50s and onward, it was really taboo to talk about some of these subjects, such as cheating on your partner, having affairs, even people committing crimes, doing drugs. Each of these stories rings true to normal, everyday people, and yet they're told in such a way that even people who have never experienced these things can understand what they look like. Let's go back to that story, Gazebo. Gazebo is about a couple who owns a motel, and the motel is falling into disarray, and we find as the story goes along, major spoiler alert, that the husband is cheating on the wife, Holly, with one of the maids who cleans up the motel. Throughout the story, the husband and the wife, Holly, are trying to figure out a way that they can salvage their relationship. Perhaps they still love each other, perhaps they don't, but the failing of the motel seems to indicate, or at least be the symbol for their failing relationship. At the motel, nobody's cleaning the pool anymore. Some of the rooms stand vacant for months and they don't try to fill them. When customers complain about their experience, well, the owners, they just don't do anything really to fix the complaints. So there's no reason for customers to ever come back. As the motel falls apart, so does the relationship of our main couple. Through that symbolism, we can see this relationship falling apart. But at the same time, here's a story about infidelity and how infidelity can be sort of the rot at the bottom of the pool that grows moldy and eventually nobody can go into the pool anymore, right? Eventually it gets to a point where you got to empty that sucker out, and that's how this relationship seems to be going. So those are just a couple of the reasons why Raymond Carver is considered so great. I know it was a basic analysis, but I really do hope that this sort of thing can help you write your essays. One of the reasons why it's so fun to read great works of literature is that it immediately connects you to a whole community of people who also love to read great works. Works that have endured and lasted in our culture and are still read today. Also, if you're thinking about doing an MFA, well, this is one of the collections you'll almost definitely be reading in your first year, and it never hurts to get ahead. So, whether you're writing an essay or looking to improve your own writing, Raymond Carver is a perfect person to steal some techniques from to improve your own work. Anyways, thanks for joining me today. I hope this video was helpful. Once again, please subscribe. It helps me put these videos out. And I hope everybody's having a great day. Be sure to drink enough water and get enough sleep, and I will see you next time.